Welcome to the Strongman Way podcast. It's been a little while. Good to have you back. Good to be back. How was Tokyo?
I shouldn't have left. I could have stayed there.
Yeah. I'm glad you came back.
No, really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
Love Japan.
Yeah, it looked
So
really
much
cool.
fun.
It looked like a heap of fun.
I could live there and it would be perfect for everything bar training.
But the
And
gym you found was pretty good, but not for strongman,
Yeah.
I guess.
No, it was kitted out for like IPF type
Yeah,
powerlifting.
yeah.
So it's probably the only gym where you can actually deadlift heavy, but also are allowed tattoos. So thank God for that.
Yeah, of course. You forget about the tattooed humans.
Yeah.
Kind of like get the offsided over there.
I'd have to be really nice about it, full cover up to here, and
Yeah.
maybe they'd let me get away with hand.
but still the hand kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, especially because it's like Japanese style too.
Yeah. But they've got like a big Gold's gym and like cool big gyms. I'm just not allowed.
Oh, so even in those big like franchise gyms that are more Western, you can't go.
No,
Wow.
not at all. It's only because this one's small. They deal with a lot of foreigners.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
because they're kind of powerlifting and stuff,
Yeah.
it's just different.
Maybe like a little bit more normal in our sport as well.
Yeah.
Like everyone's got a beard and tattoos.
Yeah, so there was like 3 other guys that did strongman
Yeah.
outside of Tokyo. It was just too far to get to.
Yeah.
It would have been like an hour and a half. It was in their shed.
Are we going to see Leigh do a secondment overseas for 6 months, 12 months anytime soon?
To do what?
To go live and work overseas in Tokyo?
I could open a gym.
You could. Strong Tokyo.
Yeah, we'll find a suburb that rhymes with Geelong, and we'll roll with that.
Today we've got a fair bit to talk about. Obviously, we haven't caught up for a few weeks now. But the most immediate thing would be hard to ignore. Arnold's
Yep.
2023, one of the biggest comps outside of World's Strongest Man in the yearly calendar for our sport, took place over the weekend. Obviously, Worlds is not too far afterwards.
Yep.
Right. So I think that we see a few people maybe not give it 110%. Do you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
they all do, but like I think you're also conscious in the back of your mind that like someone like Tom Stoltman, who wants
Yep.
to win Worlds again, would you blow the gasket on an Arnold's if Worlds was coming up and that's a better suited comp to you? Maybe not. Right?
Yeah, they've had a slow prep back.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like they're in a rush to do this comp.
No, yeah, 100%. Like I think the eye on the prize for some of those guys is definitely Worlds. But either way, like some really killer performances.
Yeah, and at that level, like everybody forgets, like they come 7th or 8th, and they're like, "Oh, that shit, I'm so disappointed." And it's like, it could be a couple of reps, a couple of seconds,
Yeah.
and that's the difference. Like
Very
they didn't
easy
do
to get edged
poorly,
out. Yeah.
but that's just the result they got because other people went harder.
Yeah, or consistency as well.
Yeah.
Like we saw, like we were talking about before, like Mattias winning 3 events,
Yeah.
but not winning. But Michupa not winning any events, but coming first, right?
Yep.
And even like we were talking about Bobby and Trey, like getting edged out just
Yep.
because he didn't do the frame,
Yeah.
which was a surprise to a few people.
Yeah, I think the frame had knurling on it. It was just heavy.
Yeah,
Last event,
tough. And the girls,
smashed it.
huge.
Really competitive.
Once again, the
Back and
girls
forth.
stealing the show.
Yeah, like it'd be interesting with the ratings and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So that's the first time that they've had the exact same events as the men.
Yeah.
Same time frame, everything like that. Usually the pro show is kind of just like off to a different section.
It has its own sort of thing.
Yeah, different events. It's kind of just like the amateurs, but the pro version of that.
Yeah. Which is exciting for the female.
Yeah, super competitive. It's hard to pick who gets to go because Arnold's is always like invite.
Yeah.
You don't qualify to go to Arnold's. It's all just who Rogue wants.
Yeah.
But yeah, back and forth the whole time. Like Victoria Long started off not terribly, but not what people would think.
Yeah.
Olga was winning leading into the last event.
Yeah.
The Ukrainian.
Yeah.
And then had to place top 3 or 4, but that meant running it in like 8 seconds.
Yeah.
And just didn't happen.
No. So it's tight, right? Which
Yeah.
is super interesting.
Everybody just got quicker and quicker
Yeah.
up that frame run.
I saw an interesting thing during the week on like that Gym Life podcast.
Yeah.
Did you see the monster truck analogy? Because
from the other guy.
I'm very curious to know your idea on this. Anyway, so there was this podcast. It's called the Gym Life podcast. Worth checking out. There's get some good guests on there. But there was a guy on there talking about strongman, talking about weight classes, and he's prefaced it with, I have a contrary opinion. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a controversial opinion, and he was talking about weight classes, and he said, weight classes are all fine, but it's not what Strongman is about. Essentially, he said, I don't go to see a monster truck shows to go watch mini trucks.
Yeah.
I go watch monster truck shows to see the fucking monster trucks.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like Strongman is about the freak show.
Yeah.
The big giants moving crazy weights, and that is the spectacle. Now, I got a lot of backlash.
Yeah.
And like obviously the sport is diverse and we have a lot of weight classes. But at the top end or at the bottom line of things in terms of the sport, what gets exposure? What do you think about that statement?
Well, it depends what you're going to watch the Strongman show for. But if you're watching the biggest people move the biggest weights, that's it.
Yeah, they're the monster trucks.
That is it. Everything else is scaled to that.
Yeah.
Even the 105s, the pros, it's still scaled world's strongest man.
Yeah.
I mean, if you went to watch different car races and you were watching who's the fastest, who drifts the best or something like that.
Yeah.
Different sort of analogy.
But then we're talking different sports.
Yeah, then you would have to change the events of Strongman to
I think that's likening it
showcase
to
different elements.
Well, I think that's likening it to looking at CrossFit versus Strongman.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's a totally different ball game where if we're looking at what the analogy is talking about, it's like you said, we're just scaled down or watered down versions of the monster trucks.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting because while I'm a weight class athlete, I do tend to agree in terms of like I know that the weight class athletes from a competition or watching the competition standpoint, often better.
Yeah.
Right? Tighter competitions, the guys are insanely strong in their respective weight classes to their respective body weights.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there's still a reason why there's no weight classes at the Arnold's on the pro show.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like we're not up on that big stage.
Yeah.
You know, we're not getting $50,000 worth of prize money. And I know that we're good. And I know that we're great to watch. If you're interested in the sport,
Yeah.
if you're already into the sport, if you know what the sport is, and even if you're not into the sport, but you have some understanding of it, I think it's really great to watch. And maybe if you're like a lighter person wanting to get into the sport, maybe they're the inspiration.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can achieve that, but you can't achieve that.
Yeah. I said it to someone else the other day about like amateurs and paying for memberships and paying for comps, and there's so many amateurs, but then all the focus goes on the pros.
Yeah.
I was like, well, yeah, like the amateurs and us as a whole sport kind of fund the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
And yes, it does go to the pros, but without the pros and the spotlight on the pros,
There's no weight classes.
there's not really any weight classes because nobody wants to sponsor the sport.
Yeah.
And no one really gives a shit about the sport because no one wants to see you lift a 70
because the
kilo
exposure,
log.
exactly. Like the exposure comes from a 200 kilo log.
Yeah, so
not
it's
a
got to
70
go
kilo
back and
log.
forth.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
unfortunately,
you probably need both. Like they both have a role to play in terms of one, developing the sport, and two, creating exposure for the sport for like broader public.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, when it comes to like sponsorship money, big shows, like the monster truck thing, just go back to the monster truck thing.
Yeah.
Like it's what the people probably at the top end want to see.
yeah, people still play A grade, B grade footy,
Yeah.
and they probably still fund a lot of that, and people still come to watch.
Yeah.
But it's not NRL. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
AFL.
100%. Yeah.
It's just not.
yeah.
I don't know. I think the big guys get it easy in a sense. Like you get a big guy that walks out onto a main stage, especially with a big personality.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it. And even if they can't lift anything impressive,
Yeah.
if they lift something, you think it's impressive.
And that's the hard thing. It's a show. Like
Yes.
people forget, like it's a sport, but at the top end, it really is about like, and it benefits us that these guys are doing
Massively.
it. You know, like it's part and parcel of what helps our business, helps
Yep.
the gyms. People follow these guys because they're larger than life,
Yep.
right? They have pull. You know what I mean? Like in terms of engagement or like wow factor or like that spectacle.
You watch them hop on a plane or just go sit anywhere and it's entertaining.
fascinating.
Yeah, you're like,
it's fascinating.
how do
Like,
they get
look
around?
at that guy get on a plane. How's he doing that? How's he
Yeah.
living life?
Yeah.
It's like there was like I think Thor and stuff like that put out like photos of him like in fucking economy.
Eddie
you know?
did that recently.
Yeah, and
Economy,
it's just,
business, and
it's
premium.
ridiculous, and it's like and that ridiculous factor is kind of what feeds the sport.
You want to see more.
You can't look away.
Yeah.
It's a big, giant, enormous train wreck of a human who's really strong. But you're right. A lot of the time at the top end, there's weight class guys who could beat some of those guys.
Well, like Britain's.
Yeah.
I think it was Britain's. I watched part of that, and they had that deadlift ladder.
Yeah.
Which was like a 300, 320, 40, 60, 80. Might have finished at 80. It might have finished at 400. And 3 of the guys, obviously newer guys, came out and couldn't do 360. Like, not a chance in hell of doing 360. And I'm like, with a suit, I'm like, I know a lot of people in Australia, and we're not crash hot.
Yes.
That can do that.
Yeah.
Not heavyweights.
No, not heavyweight.
Like, you could roll in and get to 360.
Yeah. Maybe
but
just
the thing
deadlift
is,
event though.
yeah, but if you did that next to somebody else, if you did that next to Andy Black and he for some reason failed that, whatever he did would still seem more impressive if you just took a snapshot of it.
Totally, right?
Because
if you're
it's just
watching
a big dude.
This is the big guy, right? And I think
so we need a way too big personality to over. You need to be like Yuri.
Yeah,
you need a big personality to overcompensate. Totally. But you're not 180 kilos.
And I think that's the real key here. And that's important for any weight class athletes looking for sponsorship or whatever else it is and trying to like crack into.
You have to stand out.
You have to stand out,
and
right?
you can't physically stand out.
100%. But when you get a big guy who's got a good profile, and we see this in World's Strongest Man all the time, when you're looking at the selection, there's guys in other countries that are stronger.
Yeah.
But whether it's the country they're from, the profile, or just, and like the persona that they bring, or just the sheer spectacle of a giant human being being on the World's Strongest Man footage, like that's what they're looking for also.
Yeah, as long as they can back it up with lifts.
Relative strength.
They've either got to be competing and beating top people, or they've got to be somewhat posting actual numbers that are visible. Like, you see someone deadlift 450, you can't lie about that. Yeah. Like, you can.
But there's a lot of people in World's Strongest Man who are nowhere near that.
Yeah.
That are still getting invites.
Yeah. But they can still carry themselves on
100%.
most events.
And like events, and it's always event dependent. And also World's Strongest Man isn't the heaviest comp. It's not Arnold's.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's event specific. Like, I think a lot of those guys who might get a look in for World's Strongest Man maybe won't get a look in for like something like Giants, which are typically actually heavy comps, and they're a bit more selective in terms of like, we need a show where people can lift this stuff.
Yeah. And well, look at Paul Smith.
Yeah.
5'10".
Yep.
Got invited to Worlds this year.
Yep.
Got invited off like being a reserve, I think 2019 or something. Yep. He got told about it. He was the last of 3 reserves to get called in.
Yep.
And I think he got told like a minute. He was in like slides when they were warming up for sandbags. It was like Lawless or somebody did something to their calf. And they're like, Paul, you want to be in? And he just grabbed his shit, ran straight out to the first event. And they're like, how'd you do? And he's like, terrible. My heart rate was high and I hadn't warmed up.
Yeah.
Like the worst combination.
Yeah.
But since then has never got an invite, but has consistently beaten so many of the UK guys that are bigger, that have a bigger profile. He's fairly quiet.
Yeah.
And he executes really well. So like, you watch Evan Singleton lift and it's a car crash. It's either going to be great or something's getting torn off the bone, but it's exciting. Yeah. Paul Smith just executes so well.
He's loud. He's American, right?
He has tattoos of Raptor on his fingers.
You just can't ignore him. Right?
Yeah. He's a WWE character.
Yeah, seriously.
Whereas Paul Smith executes so well that it's not boring. It's very skillful. But if you don't know what you're watching, it could seem boring.
Yeah.
Because there's just no mistake.
Got to have some flair, and I think that's important for all weight classes to remember. Like, it's a sport, and it's a spectacle. Like, you got to bring some flair to it. You got to, like, you're in front of a crowd. If you're competing in front of a crowd, like, entertain, because it brings more light to the sport, right?
Yeah, you don't have to, but if you don't expect.
Yeah, 100%. If you just go there and do your job, don't expect to make anything of it long term, or like actually start to develop. Especially if you're a heavyweight, don't expect to broach the next step or evolution of your career if you're not doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of invites, and I'm going to segue this to something that we were sort of talking about, or like started to make some headway into before the podcast we were chatting about. But we saw in the women's a great deadlift, but a poor performance across the other boards.
Yeah, Wilcock.
Yeah.
The black woman big hoop earrings,
Yep.
like big deadlift setup,
And
big
a-
vibe.
And a
Everyone loves it.
well-established powerlifting athlete got an invite to the Arnolds, and it was a
Yep.
little bit of like there's some contention. It's the same thing with like a Larry Wheels kind of getting invited to like the deadlift championships.
There was a lot of pro women that were just like,
yeah.
I'm sitting here.
When
why
there's
can't I do
when
it?
there's limited spots and stuff like
Yeah.
that, it's very, I guess you offsiding for those athletes.
Yeah.
When someone gets invited like that, and I guess proof in the pudding, great deadlift because that's what she's specifically training for.
Yep.
That's her skill. That's her sport. But then crossing over, we saw that it just didn't work in all the other events, right?
Yeah, just lack of time,
Yeah.
lack of skill, lack of
Yeah,
learning
100%.
implements. And then even with the deadlift, like tied with Victoria Long, but Andrea did slightly less on her
Yeah.
third, looked super easy.
Yeah.
Victoria's looked super easy.
Yeah.
And then, hers looked hard.
Yes.
So one of the biggest deadlifters of all time, and then you've got two strong women.
Yeah.
Granted, wearing straps, probably wearing briefs, like
Yeah.
a little bit different,
Yeah.
but showing that the women can actually deadlift as much, if not potentially more than the powerlifting women, which is probably a first.
Yeah.
It's been like that for a while in men.
Yeah.
Since Eddie came along, we
Yeah,
kind of
that
put a
top
stamp
end.
and went, you know what, strong men can actually deadlift just as much as you can.
Yeah. And like
With straps,
with straps and
everything
stuff
else,
like that. But like we're seeing plus 40, plus 50 to what's
Yep.
being performed at the highest level of powerlifting.
Yeah, and now we're starting to slowly see that in the women.
Yeah. And I think this is something that people often idealize or romanticize or see other good athletes, or even if you're an athlete yourself competing in like powerlifting or CrossFit or whatever it is, there's no reason why if you make a commitment to crossing over that you could be very good.
Yeah.
But just because you're a good power lifter, we'll use powerlifting as the perfect example, because people often come from weightlifting, powerlifting, or CrossFit,
Yep.
right? Rarely bodybuilding straight as a segue, because it's a big jump. Usually there's like a strength sport in between. But let's say powerlifting, 3 static events, testing max strength.
Yep.
You can be a very, very well-established powerlifting athlete and be a train wreck of a strongman.
Yep.
Because I think when people weigh it up, you have to understand, like, do you have a history of athletic base? Do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of powerlifters aren't actually very athletic. They're strong.
That was their first sport.
Yeah.
For some people, they
Yeah,
never did sport as a
100%. They
kid,
did
and
gym
then they got
stuff.
into powerlifting as an adult.
So you've got to, people have to remember, and like CrossFit, perfect example of something that is athletic, and if you're a very good CrossFitter, really good potential to cross over.
Yeah.
But for most or a lot, especially depending on the level, there's a lot of time to build the gap of one skill, but also strength.
Yep.
Right? Like, I think that's the easier one because strength is easier to develop than athleticism if you haven't had a
Yeah.
childhood of athletic development kind of thing.
Yep.
We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think people have to realize it's not as easy. I mean, some people will cross over and be fine. And it's
Yep.
often because they hold a whole bunch of the attributes that underpin the sport in itself.
Yeah, a lot of people in their first sport were good at it, but it still probably wasn't their preferred sport.
Yes.
Like, I only did CrossFit for like 8 months.
Yeah.
I was not on the fitter side,
Yeah.
but I was on the stronger side.
Yeah.
And all I came from was bodybuilding.
Yes.
So I didn't really have a strength background.
Yeah.
But then once I was doing push press and stuff, I was doing more than most at CrossFit out of nowhere. And I'm like, oh, I lean towards that already.
But you look at that as the perfect formula of sports as a kid,
Yeah.
right? Whatever they might be, but a lot of sports as a kid, coordinated, athletic, balance, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And then you look at transition to bodybuilding, right? A whole heap of accessory stuff,
Yep.
a whole heap of time dedicated to building muscle.
Yep.
And then you have a component where you build that muscle and then you go into something that's more athletic and fitness based and skill based,
Yep.
like overheads, et cetera, et cetera. And then, I'm stronger because I've done all this bodybuilding stuff, but I've still got the athletic development underpinning all of that. I transitioned to strongman.
Yep.
Ding, found something.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's kind of the perfect storm. But if you are missing an ingredient there, it doesn't have to be CrossFit, bodybuilding, all that sort of stuff, but if you're missing an ingredient in there,
Yeah. If I
you're
was
going to
some
find
of
a
the,
hard time.
if I was like some of the other guys that did CrossFit that were great at running, great at like plyometrics, great at
Yep.
gymnastics, but their clean and presses in a workout were 60 kilos and
Yep.
they'd top at 80,
Yeah.
that transition would not have worked so well.
No.
Like No, I did that transition.
Pardon?
Nah.
Yeah.
Naramu. So CrossFit for a long time at a very high level, not the shitty CrossFit that I was doing. Maori.
Yeah.
Stronger than normal.
Yeah.
Transition to Strongman. It's like, works perfect.
Spend some time. Perfect.
Strong CrossFitters transition well. And it was easier when he did it, and it was probably even easier when I did it because the strength level in this country wasn't high. I could transfer across.
Competition standards.
And I could still do most of the weights. Like deadlifts were a bit of a struggle, yoke was a bit of a struggle, but I could hit everything else. Whereas
more specific skills.
Not many CrossFitters now would be able to transition in and then hit a 120, 130 log off the bat.
Which is kind of the
deadlift 300 off the bat.
At a reasonable level if you want to be competitive. At the difference between competing for fun and competing as a competitor.
Yeah. So it was much easier back then to just smoothly transition into a different sport, whereas now it's a lot heavier.
Yeah.
And the same with powerlifting is like you've got the strength, but like you now have to run with 140 kilo sandbag. You have to do this heavy of a stone.
You have to do 8 events over 2 days.
Yeah, that too.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just different.
You have to do more than 9 lifts.
Yeah, I think it's and it's not saying that people can't, and it's not saying people won't be successful because they absolutely will, but not everyone. Like you have to weigh up. Okay, I'm thinking about crossing over. Does this? I really enjoy it, but I'm a really good powerlifter. Or if you're romanticizing that your favorite idol should try strongman, it's like, well, should they?
Yeah.
Or could they? And like some will absolutely jump in and probably do a great job, but I think the vast majority probably underplay the specific requirements of a sport that takes time to develop.
Yeah. I think people shouldn't underestimate how hard it'll be and maybe just train for your new sport for 3 months before jumping in a comp.
I mean, I did
and push for it.
Yeah, I did powerlifting and strongman concurrently for quite some time.
Yep.
Like until the point where I needed to give up powerlifting to actually benefit my strongman, right? Like squatting heavy and doing squat volume and bench volume and stuff like that and not prioritizing overheads, all the other stuff, moving events where like my legs are cooked or you've only got so much time and so much energy and so much recovery capacity each week. To do both gets hard if you want to be the best at one. Right, there comes a time when
easier
you make a
back
decision.
then compared to now as well.
But a perfect base also.
Yeah.
Right. I think maybe the next thing that we could talk about, sort of flowing on from that, when you're looking at choosing a sport or understanding what sport to choose or understanding where your weaknesses or doing like self-assessment on where you're at, understanding what is actually trainable and what is like inherent or genetic that maybe could be optimized, but maybe will always be a limitation.
Yeah, you could take it from the sport straight away and go, okay, a powerlifter's not very fit generally.
Yeah.
Trainable. Probably not super explosive, probably not super fast. Might naturally be.
Yeah.
But generally we'll be missing those key points. But then individually, there's a heap of differences between people.
Yeah.
I move relatively quick. I'm not the most explosive person.
Yeah.
But put me on jerks, movement patterns like that, dumbbell. I can get under things relatively quick. I can move relatively quick. And it was just always the case.
Yes.
It's gotten better, but some people are just very slow. And there's been people that I've coached where they've wanted to do split jerks, and eventually I've just gone, it's not for you.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Absolutely.
You're getting quicker.
Everyone thinks,
but it's still less than your push press.
Everyone thinks that the split jerk is the answer.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone with a bad overhead goes, I think I'm going to try split jerking or push jerking.
Yeah.
And the reality is for a vast majority of people, and it depends again on so many variables, it's not the answer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it is for some, but it's not for a lot. And I think that comes down to critical self-assessment and what we were talking about before, which is where did you come from?
Yeah.
What are your genetic dispositions for sport? Like we talked about this earlier in terms of strength and speed are the easy ones, right? Strength is progressive overload. Speed, you can start to work on or start to do speed work, but maybe probably has a ceiling dependent on you. It's harder to train. But we always look at strongman in terms of like how fast do you move? How strong can you get?
Yeah.
Right? strength is the easiest one. It's progressive overload in time, right?
Yeah, it's what makes strength.
Yeah.
What makes you strong.
Yes.
How stable are you? How much are you stable on the ground?
Yeah.
How much coordination do you have? How explosive, how fast you can move a bar?
Yeah.
How much force you can produce?
Yeah.
Defines how strong you are.
Yeah, it all underpins that. But then you talk about something like a split jerk, and it's like, are you coordinated? Do you know what I mean? Like, are you explosive? Are you coordinated? Do you have enough proprioception and kinesthetic awareness to be able to know where you're moving in space, to be able to execute that movement properly?
If you're really unstable overhead with your shoulders, the answer is probably not to throw a bar up, dive underneath it while it's free floating.
Yeah.
And hope that you can then catch and support it. Like if you got unstable shoulders, like that doesn't sound like a fun time.
Yeah, that's not a recipe for
You
success.
should probably get more stable shoulders and slow things down.
So if you're looking at a client and you're going, okay, we're going to critically assess what your weaknesses are or what needs to be worked on for the things that underpin strength. So we talked about this earlier. We sort of like talked about what are some of these key things. So we talked about, besides the strength component and what underpins athletic development, and we think a lot of this comes down to late diversification in your given sport, right? So like childhood sport, like adolescent sport, developing some of these key skills. Some are definitely nature versus nurture, but some are very much nurture through the younger years.
Yep.
Some are trainable. Some are... you could definitely optimize, and some you'll probably be shit at forever, right?
Yeah.
Stability, balance, proprioception, coordination, explosivity, recovery, so your capacity to recover, nervous system, kinesthetic awareness, and then the strength and the speed stuff comes last, right? Like that is the underpinning things that we neglect to understand.
And it's the time that you've spent doing them.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you think about, I've been training in the gym for 10 years.
Yeah.
Like as an adult, and people go, fuck, that's ages. And it's like, what if you were doing sport as a child from 6 to 16?
Yeah.
You don't think about that being a long time because you're just a kid messing about.
Yeah.
But that's 10 years of skill, coordination.
Critical development.
While you're a kid, when things are easier to learn, when you bounce back quicker, when you recover quicker, like that makes a huge difference compared to when you're 20 to 30 and you squat twice a week and bench once a week and call yourself an athlete. It's not the same. But you spend 3 hours in the gym and 2 hours of that is talking.
Yeah.
When you're a kid in those 10 years, you spend 10 hours non-stop climbing a tree, playing footy. Like,
you know,
there's
it's like
so many more hours.
2 hours of footy training each night, a game every week. You got basketball. Like I know I played heaps.
You play handball all day.
Yeah, 100%, right? So there's so much that happens in those early years that it's hard to make up that deficit if you don't have it from an athletic standpoint.
Yeah.
Right? But you could definitely self-appraise and understand where those detriments are and play to strengths, but also understand what you can optimize, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking at a client and you go, all right, sick, here we are, here's your strengths pretty good, but what do you think, or like how do you sort of target those things, or what do you look at when you're trying to figure out where those weaknesses or underpinning problems are, and how do you address?
Yeah, I think like stability and stuff is a bit easier because you kind of attack that through accessories anyway.
But still a key one in our sport.
Yeah, but we tend to still tick it off.
Yeah.
Whereas like training someone to be more explosive, we tend to not look at as much.
Yes.
Coordination, we tend to not look at as much.
Yeah.
You break down a split jerk and try to make people a little bit more coordinated, but you wouldn't get them to, okay, homework is to go home and do coordination drills so that you have good reflexes.
And that becomes like a hierarchy of what's actually the most important if you're triaging time spent.
Yeah.
Like how much coordination do we need in our sport, right? Like
Yeah.
hand-eye coordination, like we're not playing tennis, we're not playing cricket. Like the coordination side of stuff is important for some aspects, but for a lot of the aspects or most of the sport, probably not, right?
No.
Or not as important.
I think reflexes are a big one.
Yep.
And I also think it's just kind of inherent.
Yep.
it happens in such a split second that like it's neurological. Like you can't think and have better reflexes.
Yeah, like
but
people train it, but hard to train for strongman.
you
right?
see people pick up a stone or a sandbag and kind of fumble, but then like recollect themselves. Or you see people press something and they kind of lose it but bring it back.
Yeah,
And it's just automatic.
yeah,
And some people just can't. Like the second that they're slightly out of the groove, they're gone.
yes,
And some people have that reflex to just bring it back.
yeah.
Whereas I don't know how you can really train that if you haven't just spent a long time putting yourself in situations that require you to be better at it.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
And then like stability, it's like, okay, cool. If you're pretty stable or like rigid through your trunk,
yep.
we don't need to do bird dogs for your warm up, right?
Yeah, and just because you're stable in some joints doesn't mean you're stable in others.
Yeah.
Like your hips, your back,
Yeah.
super stable. Your shoulders, not so stable.
Yes.
My
Thanks.
shoulders, super stable.
Yeah.
My SIJ and like my lower back, not great.
Yeah.
If there's too much load, if I'm too fatigued, if my body doesn't respond right, like that reflexes,
Yeah.
my hips will just shift and then all of a sudden it goes up my back.
Yeah. And perfect example of like noting that it's individual for each person. So you should be addressing that. You know, I don't really particularly, and we've talked about this before, like I don't really particularly warm up for deadlifts.
Yeah.
Right? Like I just, what the fuck for?
Yep.
Start with a bar and I go low. But if we do overheads, and we've once again spoken about this before,
Yep.
I do a whole heap of shoulder stuff beforehand where you don't really need to. Like you can start with a log, you do anyway because you're very diligent. But
Yeah.
like you don't need to do the same level of warm up, or it's not as key importance to the success of that session for you, right?
Yeah, my shoulders aren't going to fall apart. I'm not going to injure something
No.
because I didn't do it. I
And your
can kinda get
accessory
away with
stuff
it.
probably doesn't need to be as targeted to
Yeah.
develop that, right? And that's accessory stuff all plays a part there as well. You know, like the other things are stuff that you're probably not going to train in your programming, right? Like once you get to this point, it's kind of like, well, prioritization wise, like if balance isn't great, like we're not going to put you on a Bosu ball, bro.
No, not to that degree. No.
No. But like things like kinesthetic awareness, like get away from a mirror. Do you know what I mean? Like understand how your body moves in space, feel movements instead of just like getting visual feedback all the time. So you sort of understand where things are, like a lot of small things. And then like recovery, like capacity for recovery, a great one that can be improved, right?
Yeah. Like I've given a lot of people, and it's usually a lot of bigger guys and stuff, if they get sore lower back and their hip shift and stuff, I'm like, all right, warm up wise, we do this, this, and this. Do some body weight Bulgarians.
Yeah.
You should be able to just put your back foot up and just bang out some Bulgarians.
Yeah.
Like you've got your back foot still planted. I'm like, if you can't balance doing that, how are your hips going to balance you under like a 300 kilo yoke?
Sure, totally.
And then most of them come back and go, I am not athletic. I can't balance doing just a straight Bulgarian.
Yeah.
And I'm like, see, like crawl before you walk.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like you can walk. Like obviously they're doing 300 or 400 kilo yokes, but like optimally,
3 weeks later, they're just banging them out.
Yeah.
And they've got that skill. And I'm like, okay, now you can actually stride
yeah.
and not be unstable.
And like from a recovery standpoint, it's like, okay, let's build your work capacity so you can handle more load. Like session density creeps up. Okay, we're feeling better. Let's chuck in some zone 2s, cardio sessions 2 or 3 times a week just to help respiratory function and cardiovascular fitness, right? Like let's focus on some nasal breathing for your parasympathetic nervous system and help that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
could dive in for a whole hour on
like
stress management.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like,
just winding
like
down.
sort your fucking life out. There we go. Recovery's like, it's like you.
That's everyone's just going to go, I feel so attacked. Podcast off. Sort your fucking life out.
That's every week.
It's everyone that got into this sport.
I got into this sport because my life wasn't sorted out.
Yeah, I thought this would make it better. Turns out to be good at it. You have to sort your life out. You have to unpack that.
And then, 100%. Like there's so many ways that we can manage the recovery side of stuff. I think once again, something that everyone has an individual ceiling for. So understanding where that ceiling is. Like I've got clients that know they don't recover as well.
Yeah.
So it's like we can't do the same volume or intensity week in and week out. We have to undulate certain movements because they do not recover well.
Yeah.
And then we've got other people who can bang out fucking AMRAPs for 8 weeks straight and they just froth it and they recover perfectly and they're all good.
Yeah.
You know, like everyone's different, like neurologically, recovery-wise, everything.
Yeah, I was going to say that comes down to your nervous system as well. Like it doesn't matter how big or how strong you are. It's that nervous system being able to fire week in and week out. And if it can actually get the muscles to do the job.
Yep.
And for everyone, that's different.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a lot to consider, but I think that's like a really good tool in terms of what we were talking before around like crossing over to sports, but also in terms of if you are a strongman and you're looking to optimize what you're doing, like understanding or having an understanding of like critical self-assessment in terms of where are we, what are our strengths, what could I optimize, what do I have to acknowledge is just kind of genetic predisposition, and that's where I'm at now, but it's not too bad.
Yeah.
But like there's key things that we could maybe work on.
Yeah, besides just I need to lift heavier.
Yeah.
And get stronger.
Yeah, yeah.
Like break it down into something that's a bit easier.
Not always the key. Strength is easy, progressive over a lot of time, but to optimize strength and see that curve start to happen a little bit faster.
Yep.
If you address some of these underpinning things, then voila, suddenly strength gets a little bit easier again. Right?
Yeah. And recovery wise, like pretty much for everybody, I just go, that fly loves you, doesn't it?
I know, I just won't fuck off, hey.
It's the second guest here on the podcast.
Welcome,
Give
Mr.
it a mic.
Fly. Yeah, someone, Josh, can we have a mic for the fly? Maybe he just wants some attention.
We'll get the birds from up in
the
roof.
The birds, we'll have the flies. Second Strongman way guest.
Yeah. Yeah, like the three things I always go over, and it's so cliche and boring, but it works, is sleep, water, food. Like, I'm like, we only need three things to really like continue on in this life.
Yeah.
Everything else we can do without. There's three things that are kind of crucial.
But it's so fucked out, like the three things that are so important and imperative to recovery. And
It's so hard to do.
so hard to do. Like people just don't do those things. I mean, like sleep for me is fucking shite. But then, like that's like optimizing what I can get, but accepting that like a little bit external, right? Like I understand that like sleep is a hard one for some people,
and
depending on
some people sleep 5 hours a night and function great.
Yeah, and then it's always individual.
And
right?
then some
like
people need to sleep 9 hours. Mm-hmm. And if you're one of those people, you just have to accept that that's what you need to do.
Yeah, 100%. And finding it, or finding that time, optimizing sleep habits and all that sort of stuff. But
yeah,
like food, water, and sleep are like the three. Like that's the tripod. That everything else, people forget. They're always looking for an answer.
Yeah.
Like, oh, should I do ice baths? It's like, are you sleeping? Are you eating? Oh, but once if I take this supplement, once if I take this PED, it's like, are you eating? Are you sleeping? Like,
guarantee if your food's
drinking
bad,
water?
you're dehydrated and you sleep 2 hours a night, it doesn't matter how much training you take.
If you're
and also the trend will probably not help you sleep.
Well, then there's a point of diminishing returns, right?
Yeah.
If that's the case, if it's like PEDs and stuff like that, that does affect like health, and then like performance actually goes down because suddenly you can't eat with some. You can't train, like your training might actually dissipate because you're not sleeping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You're sweating more, so you fucking need more water. You know what I mean? Like there actually is, like unless the health markers are there, unless you're actually looking after those three key things, doesn't matter how much creatine, tren, fucking whatever else you're taking or whatever else you're looking for as the magic fix. Doesn't matter how many cold baths you take.
Yeah.
It's not going to do as much as what good sleep, good food, good water will have.
Yeah, and you could sleep less, but you could have a better sleep.
Yeah.
And you could take magnesium. You could take something to have a better, deeper sleep.
Definitely.
The same as food. Like
100%.
if your food's shit, like try to take some vitamins.
Yeah.
Try to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, if you're not getting the micronutrients and stuff like that through your food, try to pick it up
just
a little
attempt
bit as
it, even if it's a lazy attempt.
Food's an interesting one. Nutrition for strongman, I think, is maybe seeing a little bit more. I think it's so interesting, actually, because something I was thinking about watching the Arnolds and a few other comps as of late. We saw a really big change. Oh, my God. Fucking fly. Oh, my God. We saw a really big shift a few years ago with a nutrition coach that got some steam. And I follow him, and he's a good nutrition coach, around recomping some of those heavyweight strongman guys. Do you remember this? Suddenly all the heavyweight guys were like six-pack abs, a little bit leaner, and mostly not as strong. And it depends on the competition. What
Ryan's nutrition coach, I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Nathan Payton.
Yeah, he did a lot of stuff for a lot of the top guys as well.
And great recomping and stuff like that all look fantastic. But like performance depends on the comp. Like an Arnold, you probably want to be heavy, and it really depends on the competition.
Yeah.
For the world, you probably want to be a bit leaner and a little bit fitter, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to adapt your body to that. But I found it interesting that we're kind of away from that again now in those heavyweight guys, I feel.
Yeah, it's
Like they're big jack guys, but like there's probably less of an emphasis on like that body composition.
I feel like it's just balanced out.
I think it's
what it
I think it's
was.
perfectly in the middle.
I think when the Giants were around and it was Brian and Thor and
Yeah.
Eddie was getting huge, everybody was like, you got to
Yeah.
be big.
I think the pendulum
retired.
swung one way, then the
Yeah.
other way, and now it's kind of found a really good middle ground.
It always does that.
Yes.
You go
With
to one
everything.
extreme
Yeah, yeah.
and people
Yeah.
directly go back to the other extreme.
Yes, I agree.
Whereas like you could say carry as little fat as possible, you'll be as light as possible, you'll have as most usable muscle as possible.
Yes.
Even though we know that being fatter still does make you stronger. Not from a contractile sense,
view.
but a body mass sense.
Yes.
But imagine Brian Shaw shredded with abs. How strong do you think he'd really be?
Not as strong.
No.
Like this is the thing, right?
But then imagine if Tom Stoltman was as big as Brian Shaw. Probably wouldn't do much.
He's probably not going to move as well. You know what I mean?
Probably
A little
can't
bit.
get around a
There's-
stone
yeah,
anymore.
there's probably like and it depends. It's so individual on the person. I think people have to
Yeah.
understand their body types, where they sit best, and that's like time at any sport or any like just time living and understanding where your body feels best performing kind of
Yeah.
thing. But one thing that I think that if we talk strongman nutrition for a bit, right? What's the ultimate goal from your nutrition as an athlete?
To recover and perform better.
Performance,
And be stronger.
right?
Yeah.
Performance, like number one goal for nutrition in any sport is performance. It doesn't matter what you look like if you're fucking last,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't matter if you have abs and miss out on the podium,
Yeah.
right? What does matter if you're performing well and you're strong enough and you're recovering well,
Yep.
right? Like we need to understand that composition or how your body looks, because people get like we're in a strength sport, right?
We all came to this sport because it didn't matter what you looked like, it mattered what you could do.
Yes.
And now it's slowly getting into cut before comp, look how shredded I am while I'm dehydrated, or
Yeah. And I don't know whether that's
recomping,
like
losing weight, and that's taking more focus over. It's like, how were your lifts this week?
Yeah.
Oh, it was shit, but like,
Yeah.
My
like
recomp's
how's your,
going good.
how's your energy, right? Like how's your
Yeah.
lifts go?
they're like, my recomp's going good. I'm like, sick, when are you hopping on stage and putting tan on?
Yeah. I think that, I don't know whether it's a social media thing, but I think it's really important for all competitors or any athlete to remember you should be proud of how your body looks because it can do something.
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the day, we are performing athletes competing in a sport, right? The way that your body looks is a product of you objectively trying to achieve your strength or performance goals.
Yeah.
You are not trying to create a body, right, to then go and do a sport. The sport, like how you look, is a byproduct of eating for training and performance and doing so well enough that you can perform optimally, and how your body lands in that is how it looks.
Yeah. It's nice to look strong, but it's better to be strong.
Yeah, 100%.
You don't want to be the person that looks the strongest and the leanest, but is actually not very strong.
I could get
you
my
don't, and
waist
you don't
down.
want to get beaten
Yeah,
by the
100
person that doesn't look like they lift a thing,
Yeah.
but is a fucking beast at it.
Totally, right? Like, I think that, like, you know, like, if we wanted to get leaner or bring our waists in and stuff like that, like, we could, but it's not functional for our
Yeah.
sport. Like, a thick waist is fucking great. It's where everything comes from, right?
As long as it's not impeding like your deadlift position,
Totally,
picking up
right?
a sandbag, stuff like that.
And this is the thing where it's, like, individual. You have to know where your body sits best, how performance feels, and what movements feel best. If you put 10
Yeah.
kilos on, your mechanics change.
Yeah.
If you lose 10 kilos, this is the thing people forget, your mechanics change. How you move and how you need to move through space with weight changes.
Yeah, massively.
So I think it's really, I find it really interesting and not frustrating, but like when you see the shift in focus away from your athletic endeavors to feeling what you think you should be looking like as an athlete versus how you should be just focusing on training and eating.
But extremes sell.
Yeah.
And extremes are easy to sell. You can sell keto, you can sell paleo, you can sell being super lean to be athletic, but you can also sell eating 10,000 calories and eating pizza to be massive, to be strong. Whereas in the middle, which is where pretty much everybody sits, and everybody probably should sit and lean towards each side depending on what time of year, you can't really sell. Don't be too fat, but don't be too lean.
Yeah.
Eat enough, but don't eat too much.
Agree.
Like you can't sell that.
No, and this is like
It's
training,
not
right?
sexy.
You can't train. Like, this is like I'm gonna put you on this phase, which is like the best way to get strong and blah blah blah. It's like, hey, these are the exercises that probably suit you, and this is the system that we're going to use, and it's progressive overload. How you going?
Yeah,
like it's been used for the last century for strength training, and this is what it is. It's not sexy. It's not. This is the right way to do this. Well, there's no right way.
We could sell it really well. We could go, here's your skill adaptation, here's your neurological output driver, here's your primer, here's this. We could put a lot of long words in there, or we could just go, essentially, you got to do this because you got to get quicker.
Yeah.
You got to do this because you got to get stronger.
Yeah.
And you got to stick with it consistently because that's how it works.
Totally. There's it's unfortunate
There's
that
a lot of salesmen that love to blow up.
There is. I mean, we're not saying that you should go eat whatever you want all the time because you're a strength athlete. I think that is a really poor part of our culture.
Yeah.
Right? This is why, like...
It does seem to be dying, though, which
it
is a good
bit.
part of people doing recomp.
Like the Strongman donuts pizza thing and like powerlifting and stuff, it is dying because people are understanding that like you are athletes and you need to treat your body as an athlete, which is really important. But it's the one thing with our culture that's always bugged me. It's like, no. You don't just get away with eating shit, right? Like eating for performance and your athletic endeavors means being healthy or eating well, which means getting in micronutrients, and if you're not, like we talked about, having supplements, right?
Yeah, finding a way to get them in.
Yeah, and then it's like, if you're eating for performance, if you're going into a competition, and I mean, weight class athletes, we cut, right? But if you're a heavyweight trying to recomp, like, sure, there's time and place. But if you're a weight class athlete making weight, maybe eating into a deficit has to be something that you're doing, right?
Yeah. It's not a year-long thing. It shouldn't be even a 6-month thing.
No.
If you need to be in a deficit for 6 to 9 months to stay in your weight class, you're probably too big for your weight class.
If you're not... do you know what a deficit is? A deficit is not eating enough for your body to maintain its current position, right? Which means you're not eating enough fucking food, right? For your body to maintain its function, right? To maintain where it currently is.
But then you're going to train heavier so that your body can adapt to get stronger than it's
You're trying
ever
to adapt to get stronger than, 100% what it's ever been. Or you're trying to increase your training load, increase your output, increase everything about your training to get to certain competitions, but you're not eating enough for your body to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So a deficit into competition doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're a weight class athlete. And then a huge surplus isn't good either. Yeah. Health goes out the window. You're eating shit. Inflammation becomes a problem. Like most of the time, you're probably not hitting micronutrients because you're eating like an asshole.
Yeah. People get tied to a pre-workout meal being the make or break of a session.
Yeah.
It's probably what you had yesterday and last night.
Well,
that'll probably make and break it.
It's the sum of all your nutrition.
Yeah, but if you ate
fuck
all yesterday,
yeah,
doesn't matter what you're going to have an hour before training. It's not going to save you.
No,
but
definitely not.
If you ate well yesterday, and like if I went and trained now, after only having breakfast 4 hours ago, I'll be fine.
Yes.
If I didn't eat breakfast this morning, I'd be fine.
Yeah.
Because yesterday was good.
Yeah, I'd just be hungry.
And the day before was good, and the day before was good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's food in the system.
So I generally don't get that hungry.
No, yeah.
It's rare. Like I get a sore stomach, and I'm like, what is that?
That's new.
I'm like, am I cramping? I'm like, nah. I'm like, oh, that's hungry. I'm hungry. What the hell? This is why I'm a 90. And I talked to a few of the other guys, like Chris in New Zealand and stuff. And he was just like, I just struggle to eat. I could just drink coffee all day. And I'm like, this is why we're 90s.
Yeah.
This is why my smoothie in the morning is just like,
food,
everything
with good
I can.
Food, right?
And like the micronutrients that I tend to not get in, and a lot of fruits and a lot of like seed options.
Yeah, for sure.
And I hate nuts. So like putting a nut butter and like, but without that, I would not, I'd be mid 80s.
Yeah. So like health, but like, not a huge surplus. Not a huge deficit if you have to be in deficit, but if you're in deficit, it's for a period of time to achieve a certain goal.
Yeah, you need a way out.
If you're a weight class athlete and you're probably carrying too much fat, there is a period of time to recomp outside of competition. If you are sort of sitting around your weight, if you're like let's say you're 105, but you're a shitty looking 105, right? Yep. You probably, it depends on your body type again. Like not everyone's designed to be a fucking, like some people are naturally really lean. Yeah. Right? I don't want to be super lean because I don't feel strong, super lean, right? Like it doesn't agree with my performance. Like 12%, it's like there's a contractile fiber element to it. Yes, like maximizing the amount of muscle that you're carrying at your body composition or your body weight for comp.
Yep.
But there's like a limitation to like how your actual body is too, like understanding your body and knowing where it needs to sit. I just think that once you understand where your body needs to be, there's a period for recomping, but if you're kind of around that weight, there's no point recomping into a competition if you're already at that body weight and eating less than what you should be. You should just be eating nutritiously to drive your training and your food, and then look at recomping in off seasons, right?
Recomping will generally happen though, just over a longer period without.
Of course.
Like I've got pictures of me weighing in at 90 or being 95 from 6 years ago at comps.
Yes.
And everyone's like, you look so small. And I'm like, I was the exact same weight. It just looks very different now.
Recomping will happen if you eat nutritiously and for performance over time and keep training for performance.
Yeah, like it took 6 years. It wasn't 6 months. I don't have a great before and after.
Yeah.
But I also didn't really have to put much effort into it. I just had to be consistent.
Yes.
And it eventually I got stronger. I added a bit of muscle. I got a little bit leaner.
Do you think there's a general guideline for like, I don't like using body fat percentage, but body fat percentage for males and females? If you were going to say like, look, if you're kind of over fucking 35% or 30% for a male in a weight class capacity, you probably need to look at like just looking at your recomp and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, you're just going to struggle with a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard.
And unless you're naturally like a 10% kind of person, like dude, 10% isn't ideal. Like you got to remember hormone function and stuff like that is really important. Like if you're a female under 14% or like trying to get super lean, like if your hormone functions, if you're not carrying enough fat, you're not going to perform as well.
Yeah.
Right. Same with men. If you're not actually carrying a little bit of body fat, like function isn't as optimal in your body.
Unless you just naturally sit there.
Unless you naturally sit there.
But then the people that naturally sit there tend to eat a lot of food.
Yes. 100%.
And they just don't put on weight. So at least they're well fed.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you had to get ridiculously lean by in a deficit, the second that you eat more food to then support that, you're probably just going to go back up in body fat percentage a little bit.
Yes.
So why'd you come down so hard?
Yeah.
If it's not maintainable and you're just going to go back up.
Maintainable too.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I think that at the end of the day, the key thing is composition only matters if there's a real need for composition.
Yeah.
Outside of that, composition will change if you are consistently eating for performance and training for performance.
Yeah, we used to think of it as a really nice byproduct of our training and of our lifestyle and of our sport. We used to be like, cool, we're training to do stuff and that's what's important. It doesn't matter how we look, but if we look good or we look better, then that's great.
And you will, because training for performance doesn't mean going and eating fucking burgers 3 times a week and pizza and having donuts, because that's not eating for performance. Eating for performance is eating good protein, high volume meals with good micronutrients, like good carbohydrates, a reasonable amount of fats to sustain everything. I just go into that far too deep. But to sustain your performance and your well-being so you can keep training and then train fucking hard.
Yeah.
And then guess what happens? You're eating great. You're getting good nutritious food. You're getting enough protein and stuff in. You're training really, really hard. And we're suddenly not in a subjective place where we're constantly looking at our bodies and going, like we need to look a certain way. These guys look like this. This is the standard if I'm a like weight class athlete, or this is like the physique that I have to be as an athlete. Yeah. It's like, it actually just we focus on the objective outcomes, good food, right? Making sure that we're eating good food and objectively looking at our training and training really hard. And suddenly the goals that we were so hung up on subjectively and trying to reach probably happen anyway, passively, without even realizing it.
And probably quicker, with less stress.
That's what I love about like strongman and like strength sports. Like probably you were the same. Like when I was doing bodybuilding and like when I was young, like pre like 21, probably even like when I started powerlifting and stuff. Like you look in the mirror every day and you're like, oh, my shoulders aren't big enough, or like I'm not lean enough, you know.
Yeah.
Like, Like my legs are lagging behind, I don't have separation and stuff. You're just constantly looking at the subjective and constantly critically looking at like how you look and being like, oh, this isn't enough, like I'm not enough, whatever it is, right? This isn't enough equals essentially like I'm not enough, right? Where then the reason why I love strength sports so much is for people like that, and like it was myself when I was young to trying to do bodybuilding, it takes you so far out of subjectively, critically always looking at your body and puts it into objectively looking at training and numbers and trying to eat to get your performance better and train to actually perform better. And suddenly you're not looking at it in the mirror every day going like, oh, like suddenly you're like analyzing lifts, looking at that sort of stuff, and haphazardly you start looking better.
Yeah, there was like certain muscle groups that I could not grow doing bodybuilding. And like my traps just did not want to grow. No matter how many shrugs and whatever I did in a bodybuilding gym did.
I want to see pics.
They definitely weren't there. I was wide, but I was very like thin side on. And then I went and did CrossFit, and they don't even have a mirror in the CrossFit gym, so I had no idea. And I just did that. And literally just from like the cleans, the snatches, the pulling work, the pull-ups and stuff, all of a sudden I was like, I've just gotten thick and somehow look stronger, but I'm doing fitnessy stuff. Like I spent years trying to do this in bodybuilding and it just didn't go. So it makes a big difference.
Totally. I think that like that's one of the key things that like when I'm not selling but like explaining to people the benefits of strength training, that's one of the key things, because so many people, I know so many people like look in the mirror or jump on the scales and are constantly like unhappy with like what they see or what they do. And it's like, first problem, you're focusing on something that's a relatively subjective outcome that you're never going to be happy with. No matter how much you run like around in circles trying to like look in the mirror and see progress, when the progress comes and you're there, you're still not going to be happy.
A lot of the time it's worse.
It gets worse,
Some
because
people,
the better you get, 100%, the more critical
you
you get. Yes.
They go, oh, back when I was really big, I didn't even think I was big. And now they're lean and they're like, I feel so fat.
Totally.
I'm like, now you're more unhappy.
Where like strength training should just be thinking about performance outcomes, eating really well, training really well, and then getting out of that headspace and focusing on the objective things, right?
Good
and
thing
then
is,
things happen.
if you look better and your training's going shit and you feel weak, then you can always fall back and go, at least I'm looking better than I did. Training was shit and I felt weak, but I'm going to go do some curls and feel good about myself. Like, you have a backup option. It's not your first option.
We hope this helps. Anything else you want to add on nutrition?
Not really. The only other thing that I would have touched on was, and I think it is changing, people's views on like getting a nutritionist or focusing on nutrition, and they only tend to do it when it's
convenient or important.
Extreme ends. Like you wouldn't just jump on and go, oh, in 6 weeks I've got a comp. Can you peak me for this comp? The rest of the year I'll do my own training. I'm good. It's like, what? Doesn't really work like that. So I think more and more people are getting nutritionists to do off season when the recomp's not important. What's important is eating for performance,
increasing metabolic baseline, so you can eat more food, and then when you cut food, you're actually eating more food, and you like for your
so
comps and
people
stuff.
are like, I don't need a nutritionist because I'm not looking to gain or lose weight, and it's like, well, no, and it's not even getting a nutritionist; it's just focusing on nutrition.
I think it's you don't have to get a nutrition, but focusing on nutrition year round.
Yeah, but you tweak things.
Yes.
While you're in your off season, you're not trying to get bigger or smaller, but you're like, my recovery is kind of shit. Can I supplement some different things?
Yes.
I've heard having vitamin D or having this is better. I've heard eating this is better.
Yes.
Like focusing on it all year.
Yeah.
Rather than just waiting till 6 weeks out and going,
okay, I've got to cut weight.
Oh shit, yeah, I've got to do this.
Yeah.
Now I've got extreme.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, I haven't been eating that much, but now I've got to cut weight. So suddenly I'm really not eating a lot of food, where like that off season or that time, if you're focusing on nutrition year round, it's like, well, I'm increasing my metabolic baseline. I can eat more food. I've built myself up where my body weight is at maintenance, but I'm now eating 4,000, 5,000 calories or 3,500 calories or whatever it is for you.
Yeah. I had somebody say it to me years ago that like, line your training and your nutrition up and like your PEDs. Yeah. Because they're all about those as well. And they're like, those three have to line up to the same goal at any given time. So like,
they have to be synergistic.
If you're looking to be in a deficit and you're looking to increase, like, and then training wise, you're obviously not going to peak.
Yes.
If you're in a deficit. So you're looking to increase like aerobic function, skill, baseline, all that sort of stuff. And then it's like, then if you have supplements, drugs, whatever else it has to be, you pick the ones and you choose the ones that complement the other two.
Yeah.
And you line those three things up.
Makes
So
total
like
sense.
off-season wise, even if you've got nothing planned, whatever your training is pushing towards, whatever that goal is,
Yeah.
food should follow that.
Yes. Yeah.
And then when you peak for a comp, same thing.
And the only contrary is to what we were talking about, which is having to cut for comps where you may have to be in a deficit.
But then you pick, do I cut early and then try to feed myself back up into comp?
Yeah.
Do I have a low, slow deficit the whole way through prep, which is kind of shit,
Yeah.
but manageable?
Yeah.
Or do I just stay heavy, have a really good prep, and then in that last week risk it by doing quite an aggressive cut
Water cut. Yeah.
and being smart with how I bounce back from that?
Yeah.
And then you have that plan. My friend now.
Swapped.
Yeah.
Yes. Agreed. What would your ideal weight, if you were, what range would you say that is reasonable? I guess it depends on weight classes too, percentage of body weight. But what range would you say most people should cut for the bigger comps?
For the bigger comps.
Well, you shouldn't really be cutting for an amateur comp anyway, really. Only if it's a
Depends how
couple
many
kilos.
times you've done it.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'd said it before, like when I first had to cut, well, I didn't have to cut weight when I first competed.
Yeah.
I was 88 kilos.
Yeah.
And then I was 90 or 91 or 92. And like over time, I just kept manipulating that and it just kept growing as I kept growing. So honestly, like 2 kilos is really easy to move.
Yes.
If you're 2 kilos above your comp weight,
Yep.
probably in any weight class,
Yeah.
and you're eating well,
Yeah.
you can manipulate that in the last week and make it pretty cruisy.
Would your preference be to eat through a prep and then just cut water?
Yeah, so I've done both. I've brought it right down, sat at 91 as I led into comp.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just didn't feel like I went as well. I felt like training was a little bit harder.
Yeah.
I just sat a bit leaner than what I would have liked.
Yeah.
But then I've done the opposite where I've done really big cuts and I still actually performed really well. It just sucked.
Yeah.
So if I can find somewhere in the middle where it's probably still on the bigger end, but that extra hour in a sauna,
Yeah. Really cooks.
it's like a time machine.
Yeah.
Like you do
Slows
10
down.
you do 10-minute hits of like just 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
I put my head down. It's a time machine.
Yeah.
Like I'm in there for the whole movie of like Titanic or Avatar
Yeah.
2, and then someone pops in and goes, "You got 4 minutes left."
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm angry now. You're taking the piss. I've been in here for 20 minutes and you're lying to me.
I tend to agree. Like
And it's
obviously
only the last one that really gets me.
Obviously, no, I don't do a big water cut.
Have you done any water cuts?
Yeah, I do a water cut every time, bro. What are you talking about?
Just for
3
fun?
kilos?
Just for fun?
No, I find that, I mean, last time not really, but I've always found that 108, 110 is like the sweet spot from a performance, filling out my belt, equipment, how I move, all that sort of stuff. It just feels good, right?
Yep.
Probably feel a bit stronger, heavier, but like maybe for strongman, probably not as like quick, probably like a little bit heavier around, but like feel statically strong. I find that like I move really well 108, 110, but things just feel good, right? That's why I feel good. I definitely preference just maintaining like 108, 110, like I'm 106, 107 at the moment kind of stuff. I have been recomping, but not for the goal of like this comp.
Yep.
I'm like, I want to, I brought my weight down and I slowly want to get back up to like 110, 111 and carry more mass for later in the year.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm taking a longer, broader stroke of like, okay, I wanted to drop some body fat because I was carrying too much extra body fat, because after I got back from my trip, I decided to get up to 110 by eating 3 bagels a day. And it was fucking glorious.
Yeah.
But I was just carrying too much weight. Like I didn't feel good. I didn't feel healthy. I wasn't doing it the right way, right way. So I brought it back down, but I definitely would preference being or eating 4,500 calories a day, maintaining like 108, 109.
Yep.
Eating plenty of food throughout my whole prep. And if I can maintain, if I've built my capacity for caloric intake up to like that, and I'm maintaining like 3 kilos of range, I'm eating heaps of food, then I'm just going to cut 3 kilos, right?
Yeah.
That's
you can just do that in the
best
last
case
week.
scenario, right? Off season, build up your capacity to have calories, then maintain at that body weight that is within range of your weight class.
Yeah.
Just maintain it and cut a few kilos. It's super easy.
Yeah.
That's
It's
my
it's
preference
the fine
anyway.
line of pushing your calories up without pushing yourself out of that weight class.
Yeah, 100%.
Which people
right?
tend to do.
Yeah, 100. There's a
They
line
get
you've
their
got
calories
to
up,
walk.
so
You gotta
they're
do it
like, I've
slowly.
got a lot to pull.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but now you're 10 kilos out. So you got a lot to pull out, but you're
Yeah,
going to have to
yeah.
pull a lot out.
So it's kind of understanding like what range that you can kind of do that. But I definitely think that eating in a deficit into competition in general, especially like even if it's a long, slow kind of like minimal deficit, I just feel like, cool, I'm just death by 1,000 needles every day I come in and train, you know?
Yeah, so I've probably got one client that'll be doing that this year.
Yeah.
Or probably
Some people prefer it,
probably
and that's
now.
okay, yeah.
Well, the goal was always a 105.
Yeah.
Really wants to do 90s.
Yeah.
Far more competitive at 90. Height-wise, probably sits better at 90.
Yeah.
So it's like the comp just turned up at a bad time.
Yeah.
But the comp sort of gives focus. So it's like, unfortunately, this comp, the whole prep is going to be a deficit. But then
After that, it gets easier.
you will be 92, 93, and this is where you will stay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the competition's for the rest of the year. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, this one's going to be tough.
Yeah. And once we're there, we can maintain that. We can
Yeah.
build your base up at that weight or like within
Yeah.
a range of that weight, and then you'll feel good.
It's
But
not
this
a
one's
case.
gonna
It's
suck
not a
little
case
bit.
of a big slow
Yeah.
deficit
Import-
cut and then go back to 104.
Important to remember there's a whole bunch of circumstances. So this always changes based on the individual.
Yeah, and it's a long-term thing.
Yeah.
Short-term suffer for long-term gain.
Yes. That's all. We're done. Have a great time. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll see you in a fortnight's time.